So good for him. Dave Wilson of ESPN.com joins us on Sikkim 365 Radio. Dave, back in October of last year, of course, the story about Earl Campbell, Ricky Williams, and the field from Joe Jamel Field being changed to those two Heisman Trophy winning running backs. You wrote an article, Earl Campbell got up inside the second act of a Texas Longhorn legend. We have interviewed Earl. We have talked about Earl. We've talked about his battle with many things, including, of course, being able to even move and always having to be in the wheelchair, his alcohol, all of that, depression. The timing of what you wrote about him, what was the reaction, first of all, when you went deep into Earl Campbell's life and the reaction you got with your story?
Well, I think the reaction is that it's shocking when you see somebody that all of us consider to be superhuman was playing basically with a congenital spine defect known as stenosis. That's the same thing that caused Michael Irvin to retire, Cooper Manning to not play football. And basically, he didn't discover that till long after he played that he could have been paralyzed basically on any play he played football.
Dave, for Earl Campbell, I've always seen him as like maybe the most important football player in the history of the state of Texas because he brought so many people together and maybe knocked down some prejudices. And he doesn't, like to think of himself that way, but I mean, he certainly is someone who broke down a lot of walls.
Earl is he's a chameleon really in a lot of ways. He's remarkable that way. He's in East Texas, obviously he's a legend. He's a legend everywhere, but he's a god there, and he can hang out with Willie one day and hang out with Ricky Williams the next day and hang out with Vince Young the next day. And then, and he just fits into every crowd, every room. And I think that's a really remarkable feat, especially for somebody of his generation that grew up in a time and place in East Texas when that wasn't always the most hospitable environment.
I know it has been a while now, but at the time and even now lasting until this point, the honor of the naming and being recognized in that way and the changes Texas was making, how special do you think that was for Earl?
I talked to his son the other day, and he said they were at practice the other day, and that the new end zone is really taking shape now, and they have the name, the Campbell Williams Field, over the tunnel there with the big Longhorn logo built into the stands behind it and his picture up behind it. And he said, it was pretty remarkable seeing Earl just sit there and stop and stare and sort of get a little watery. I think it's still, they announced it in October at the request of the Jamel family, which means a great deal to Earl, by the way. They're like his brothers. And the fact that they would do this for him means as much to him as any part of it. But, this is going to be the official unveiling on Saturday, and I think it just means a great deal to it.
Yeah, and that's why, obviously, you're a part of it. We'll have Earl on to kind of look back at the weekend here momentarily. I think we would be a better country if Earl Campbell, if people listened to him. Wouldn't you agree, Dave? If he has a way of saying things without being controversial, although he has said some things before that have been controversial, but he just sees things, and you wish that everybody could possibly see them through his eyes.
Yeah, he's just very direct. Earl does not dance around. I saw him this weekend. He was signing autographs, and I asked him if I could ask him a couple of questions, and he just said, "What are you going to ask me that you've never asked me before?" And he doesn't pull any punches. He doesn't waste any time. But I think he sees the good in a lot of people. Obviously, I'm sure in time and business and in life, he's dealt with plenty of adversity and plenty of shady characters. But he seems to just see the best in people and want the best for people.
Dave Wilson, ESPN.com, with us on Sikkim 365 Radio.
Dave, on Saturday, Texas has got a kind of a tricky one to open up, and I mean, with honoring Earl might fire up the crowd, but this Louisiana game. It's rare to have a trap game right off the bat, but is this a trap game, or is that fair to say since they're both ranked pretty close to each other?
Yeah, I don't get the trap game. I mean, Sarkisian said this week, this opponent has our full attention. He knows he worked with Billy Napier at Alabama. He knows exactly what kind of coach he is. Louisiana is returning the most production of any team in the country this year in terms of returning talent, people that have played, and they got a pretty good quarterback. And, you know, they went into Iowa State last year in the opener and put it on them pretty good. So they lost one game by 3 points. So I think they know that they're going to have their hands full. And you just don't know with the new coach exactly how things are going to shake out. So I do think that they're very, very prepared for a tough game.
What's the buzz you sense around Hudson Card? And you know, odds are we probably still see Casey Thompson based on what I was reading from Sarkisian. But what do you think the feeling is right now about the confidence level in those two guys?
Well, I think it's interesting. You know, after the first scrimmage, Sarkisian came out and said that they did not play well. After the second scrimmage, he came out and said they were much better. Then, you know, he hesitated on naming a starter last week, and then this week he came out and said Hudson will start, but he will start for game one, and Casey will play. So it didn't seem like the strongest vote of confidence to me. I mean, maybe it's also a coach trying to you know, get his point across that every job is up for grabs every week. But you know, I think Hudson is a Lake Travis kid that people are excited about. Another Austin kid. Taken over from a powerhouse program, but I do think it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out because Sarkisian refused to commit more than 1 week in advance on it, and you know, I'm not sure exactly what level of confidence that is.
When you spoke to Earl, and we know the story about his back, we know the story. You mentioned the spinal stenosis and the surgery, and then there was a surgery that pulled, I think, some 12 screws out of his back. He couldn't walk. What do you see of him now? He seems to be in a very good place. I know he does a lot of things on Zoom. I never thought Earl Campbell would do much on Zoom. He mentioned that to me this past week. What do you see? You see a guy at peace right now, Dave, in your opinion?
I do see a guy at peace. You know, the end of the story, he talked about how lucky he is. You know, that was one of the most striking things in talking to Dr. Jones, his surgeon, was, you know, when he put Earl under for the surgery and he would touch the screws that were in his back, you know, you can imagine how we were all in awe of Earl's legs being like the tree trunks that they were and, you know, had to have special thigh pads and everything. He said if he touched the screw, his legs would jump off the table even while he was unconscious. So he said he can't imagine how much pain he was in. So we've heard the stories of the painkillers and, you know, chasing the painkillers down with the Budweisers. And he said he had every right to be in as much pain as he was given the state of the condition he was in. So, you know, to have that removed, he felt like, you know, he was a different man. I thought it was really interesting to have his kids tell me, you know, Earl was almost a different man to them too. They didn't know the sober Earl. They knew the party, good time, you know, Earl, and he had started to, you know, have to take these pain pills to deal with the pain. And so they just seem to have a really good thing going right now where they're all, you know, back together. And he's sort of the elder statesman at Texas. His name's on the field. His legacy is secured.
Yeah, they had an intervention with the sons, had an intervention with Earl, and that kind of helped turn his life around as well. Have you ever seen the video? And it's probably somewhere, I would think, up on Google or internet, whatever you want, on YouTube, where the doctor actually drops the bag of the screws that they took out of his back, and you hear the sound like that. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
It's amazing that was inside somebody's body.
Well, he, you know, Earl said, you know, that's, you know, he didn't know any better. You know, he didn't have a lot of health care growing up. He had the same doctor from the time he was born until the time, you know, the same doctor that delivered him did his physical when he went to Texas. So, you know, he didn't have a lot of doctors or dentists growing up. You know, he didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have a lot of resources. And so he just thought when you went to the doctor, you just do what the doctor says. And he said, knowing now, you know, he would be a lot more diligent about it. But it is remarkable.
Well, I'll tell you how strong a guy he is. He didn't complain much at all about the pain over the years that we knew him and still do. But the other day I called him. He was going to come on the show this week, but I called him. He goes, well, can I call you? And I didn't. He was in the dentist chair. They were about to pull a tooth from him. And he took my call. And I said, of course. And then talked to him a little bit on Friday. Can't wait to get him on the show. Dave, great stuff. Earl Campbell got up. That's the story about how those who wanted to see him, and I think it was Sonny Spradlin's house. Is that what you were telling me before, Dave, in Kilgore?
That's right. Right over there in Kilgore. That's where that's where I first met him, and I saw that scene play out. And it was just a very matter-of-fact thing. Get on over here and say hi to Earl. He doesn't get up. And everyone was just accustomed to that.
Yeah, he's an amazing man. Thank you for your time, Dave. Good luck with the college season. We'll have you again. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Dave
Bye-bye.
Wilson, ESPN.com. The story on October 8th of 2020, Earl Campbell got up inside the second act of a Texas Longhorns legend, and they have the official, finally, because of all of what went down last year, where Campbell Williams Field will be the official part of that, even though everyone's known about that now for a few months.
My drinking memory when it comes to Earl Campbell is that it was awesome, it was fun, but I don't like Budweiser, and that's what he drank was straight up just OG Budweiser, sandwich in a can, baby. And I was like, I drank it because, shoot, it's Earl Campbell and his brothers and all that, but yeah, they love them some Budweiser.
We're not trying to drop names, but we got to know the family incredibly well. And, of course, there's the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award. Cindy runs that award in Tyler, and she's gotten to know the family incredibly well. But, he had the Budweiser and a dip or something. He was but he was entertaining, not being anyone he's not. And people gravitate to him.
Yeah,
they gravitate to him.
I had this experience with Earl, my father. We were at the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, and we sat at a table, and Earl was at our table. And my dad is an Aggie, so Earl Campbell to him, and to most Aggies, really they don't dislike him. They like Earl Campbell. It's kind of weird. All the other Longhorns live in a different category, but Earl is bigger than that, and he was really excited to sit and talk to Earl. But there were two Longhorns that sat at the table on either side of Earl and were just peppering him for stories all night long. And I could see in his face that, like, this, it's hard to, do it all night and to be on all night. But he did it, and he was so great to them. And his son Christian was sitting next to me. I said, "Is this how it is ever?" He's like, "Yeah," and he's amazing. He's ready to go at any time. And there are so many people, so many athletes that have been like, "Guys, can you just shut up for a second?" And Earl was like, "No, I'll tell you this story, and I'll tell you that story, and yeah, I'll take 100 pictures with you and every grandkid. I don't care. Let's do it. Bring him over."
When we come back, the 4 o'clock hour, a couple of other notes in college football, a couple of college